Hi everyone. Sometimes one small number on a piece of paper can cost someone their life, and the truth turns out to be more dangerous than the lie. Get comfortable. Thanks for listening. Cassie set her laptop on the hood of the truck because the power was out in the foreman's trailer. The screen glowed blue in the dark of the job site, and somehow that made the light feel colder than it was. She opened the folder of test reports for the underground parking section. Tomorrow, inspection sign-off on the columns. Monday. The wedding was Saturday, or it was supposed to be. Right now, Cassie wasn't thinking about that at all. Column C-17. The file opened right away, then another one with the same number in the file name. She frowned and pulled up both side by side. Sample number 114-B. Matched. Test date, October 6th. Matched. Lab, front range testing. Matched. Technician signature, Alan Foster. Matched. Compressive strength, 4,120 pounds per square inch. And the second number, 2,770 pounds per square inch.
She scrolled through both documents again, slower this time. Maybe she'd mixed up the columns. No, C-17 in both files. Maybe one was a draft. She right-clicked each one and pulled up the file properties. First file, created October 6th, 6:42 p.m. Second, created October 9th, 11:07 a.m. She sat there staring at those two lines for a few seconds, not moving. There had been one test, one sample, and somehow 2 documents. And the second one had been created 3 days after the test. Cassie closed the laptop and opened it again, like the numbers might have changed their minds. They hadn't. She called Gary. Rings, 3, 4. Then his voice, groggy, a TV going in the background. "Cassie, everything okay?" "Gary, I've got 2 reports on column C-17. She heard how steady her own voice sounded, and it surprised her. Same batch, same test date, different strength numbers. Silence on the other end. Gary didn't answer for a few seconds. "Which one's real?"
Cassie didn't answer right away. "I don't know. That's why I'm calling you." Gary was quiet for a moment. "You show this to anybody else yet?" "No." "Good. Don't send it to anyone yet. I'm coming out." "Why?" "I want to see the originals myself." "Gary, inspection's tomorrow." "Exactly." He hung up before she could ask what he meant. Cassie stood by the truck, holding the closed laptop with both hands. Gary showed up 12 minutes later. She'd clocked it without meaning to on her phone. Jacket thrown on over a t-shirt, hair not combed. "Show me," he said, instead of hello. She turned the laptop around. Gary read the first page without a word, then the second, then went back to the first. "Lab screwed up," he said finally. "Happens. They reran the numbers after the fact, forgot to pull the old version out of the folder." "Gary, look at the file creation date." He looked. She watched his eyes move across the line, left to right, once, then again. "So they filed the correction late. That's just how the software timestamps it." He shrugged, a little too fast for someone who actually believed that. "I'll call Front Range in the morning. We'll sort it out. The test was on the 6th. The corrected report showed up on the 9th. With worse numbers," Cassie said. "Usually when you correct an error, it goes the other way." Gary didn't answer right away. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at her. "Probably just a paperwork mix-up," he said, and the confidence was gone from his voice. "Then why are you in such a hurry to figure it out?" "Because inspection's tomorrow. If there's a mistake in the paperwork, I want to know before morning." "You sure it's a mistake?" Gary looked at the screen again. "No," he said, after a pause. "That's why I want to look into it myself." He closed the folder of reports. "Don't show this to anybody else for now, okay?" "Why not?" "Because until we know which document is real, Any explanation is just a guess. Cassie looked at him. Do you know something, Gary? No. He looked out at the concrete columns of the parking structure. We'll sort it out in the morning, the right way. Cassie made it to the Callahans just as dessert was going around. She'd stayed late at the site, longer than she'd planned, and didn't say why. The house was warm, something in the oven smelled good, and Walt, at the head of the table, was telling the story about the company's first crew, 8 guys and 1 rented crane 30 years back. You know what we cut costs on back then? He asked, and his eyes had a shine to them that had nothing to do with age. Nails. Ryan ever tell you? We used to pull nails out of old formwork and hammer them straight so we could reuse them. Sounds funny now. Ryan smiled, pouring the tea, and for a second laid his hand over Cassie's on the table. Back then it was nails.
These days, it's lawyers. We're still fighting that penalty on Ironwood Commons, he said, matter of fact, like he was talking about the weather. Purchasing's been hunting all month for somewhere to save. That fine hit hard. What was the fine for? Cassie asked. Missed the deadline by 2 months, subcontractor's fault. Long story. Ryan waved it off like the subject itself was boring, reaching for the teapot again. Don't worry about it. It's not your side of things. Walt held his gaze on his son a beat too long, but didn't say anything. Cassie nodded and tried the pie. It was good, but she caught herself checking her phone for the 3rd time that night without opening it. Something going on at the site? Ryan asked, noticing. Nothing serious, she said. I'll deal with it tomorrow. He nodded, easy, no follow-up questions, and turned back to his dad. That night, lying next to him, unable to sleep, she tried not to think about the report. She wasn't very good at it. Front range testing opened at 9. Cassie got there at 8:40 and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, watching the door. Requesting a copy of the original report, ordered directly by the owner through the city rather than the contractor, took a while to process. The woman at the front desk paged through the log for a long time, frowning, calling someone in the back. That's odd, she finally said. This report's filed through the city portal, separate from the developer's package. People don't usually come in for those directly. I need that exact copy, Cassie said. Official, stamped. 20 minutes later, the document landed on the counter in front of her. Sample number 114-B. Test date, October 6th. Lab, front range testing. Compressive strength, 2,770 pounds per square inch. The same number that had been in the second, later file. Not the one the company had submitted.
Cassie stood at the counter, holding the sheet with both hands, and felt something inside her. The unease that had been formless all night snap into focus. This wasn't a lab error. It wasn't a mix-up in dates. Someone at her own company, not at Front Range, had put together a different document with different numbers and filed it as the official one. She went outside and dialed Ryan. Wanted to tell him first, before the meetings, before the reports, just because that's who she called first. 1 ring. 2. Hello? A voice answered, not his. Trevor, a little out of breath, like he'd run for the phone. Ryan's tied up. I grabbed his cell off the desk. Cass, what's got you calling this early? She didn't answer right away. Nothing, she said finally. I'll call back later. She hung up before Trevor could ask what was going on, and stood there by the car with the original report in her hand, staring at the number 2,770, like looking at it hard enough might change it. Ryan listened without interrupting until she finished. The report sat between them on the kitchen table, a salt shaker on top so it wouldn't curl. Show me that number again, he said. She slid the sheet over. He looked at it for no more than 5 seconds. Who else has seen this? He asked. Not, are you okay? Not, how are you holding up after a day like that? She noticed it, somewhere at the edge of her attention, and pushed the thought aside. She was tired, probably,
reading too much into how he phrased things. Gary, and the woman at Front Range, when she gave me the copy. Ryan nodded, took her hand across the table. Okay. I'll talk to Trevor today. That's his territory. Supplies, all of it. If someone messed up the paperwork, he'll get to the bottom of it faster than the city would in a week. Maybe we should just file it officially, through the city? Cass. He said it gently, almost apologetic, like it embarrassed him to even ask. If we make noise with the city right now, the whole project sits for weeks, and our investor draw next month is tied to closeout on this section. Give me a week. I'll find out where this second document came from, and if it's really as bad as it looks, you file the report yourself. I won't stop you. She looked at him. He was looking straight at her, calm, no impatience, like someone asking a favor, not covering something up. A week, she repeated. A week, he agreed, and moved the sheet off the salt shaker, folded it neatly in half, like he was tucking away her worry, not the document. She didn't argue. Later, thinking back on that evening, she'd try to figure out exactly when agreeing had stopped being her own decision. But right then, at the table, it had seemed reasonable, even kind. Her phone buzzed on the table, work email. Notice of a scheduled inspection tomorrow from Denver Building Inspections. She hadn't requested one.
He showed up at 8:15, no call ahead, no heads up from the side office. Just got out of a gray city vehicle with a tablet under his arm and walked straight to the trailer like he'd done it 100 times. Sorensen, Max Sorensen, Denver Building Inspections, he said, not offering a hand, opening his tablet. I need the test reports for the underground parking section, columns C14 through C20. What's this inspection for? Cassie asked. Routine, he said, not looking up from the screen. There's no routine inspection scheduled for this quarter. He looked up at her finally, brief, appraising, not hostile, but not the least bit interested in explaining himself either. Then it's not routine, he said. The reports, please. She brought him the folder. He flipped through it fast, pausing longer on a few pages, the ones with C17 on them, Cassie noticed. He didn't ask about the discrepancy, didn't mention the second document, just photographed page after page on his tablet, quietly. You familiar with a supplier called Iron Peak Concrete? He asked suddenly, not looking up from the folder. Heard the name yesterday, Cassie said carefully. Why? He didn't answer, closed the folder, handed it back across the table. I'll need certified copies of these reports within 3 days. I'll send the request through the clerk's office. Mr. Sorensen, she said, if you already know something about this supplier, it would help to know what exactly we're looking at. He zipped up the tablet case and paused for a second at the door. Funny, it's these particular columns, he said, not turning around. This isn't the first time I've seen a number like that from this supplier. She wanted to ask something else, but he was already gone. She caught up with him in the parking lot, almost jogging, folder tucked under her arm. What did you mean, not the first time? Sorensen opened the trunk of the city car to put the tablet away, and Cassie caught a glimpse inside. A stack of gray folders just like hers, with stickers for other sites, other addresses. He shut the trunk before she could read a single name. I meant what I said, he answered. Are you investigating our company? I'm doing an inspection, he said, in the flat voice of someone who'd probably answered that question 100 times before. If you've got something to hide, you'll find out in the official report. If you don't, there's nothing to be nervous about. I'm not hiding anything. I'm trying to figure this out, Cassie said, feeling the anger creep into her voice. I'm the special inspector on this job, not the party you're investigating. He looked at her, for the first time in the whole conversation, without the formal dryness, but without any warmth either. More like careful curiosity. Then get me the copies on time, he said, and got in the car.
Driving off, he didn't wave, didn't nod, just pulled out of the lot as quietly as he'd arrived. Cassie stood there with the folder in her hands, replaying the stickers she'd seen for a split second on those other files. She hadn't caught a single address, just that there'd been a lot of them. That evening, she sent a formal request to the inspection office's clerk, asked for the case number the copies were being requested under. The reply came an hour later, automated. Information regarding active reviews is not released to third parties until the review is closed. She was a third party on her own job site. Ryan met her at home, wound tight. She knew it from the entryway, from how he didn't come to meet her right away, though usually he was there the second he heard her key in the lock. "Why did you call in an inspection?" he asked before she'd even gotten her coat off. "I didn't call anyone," she said. "He just showed up. No warning."
Trevor got a call from the city today, Ryan said, talking fast, not as calm as usual. Asking about column C-17. That one specifically, Cass. You tell anyone about this? Gary. And the woman at Front Range. When I picked up the copy, nobody else. Ryan rubbed his face. Trevor says somebody saw you at Front Range this morning with paperwork. Cassie frowned. Saw me? Who? I don't know. He wouldn't say. Who told him then? I don't know that either. Maybe someone at the lab. Trevor works with them constantly. Cassie didn't say anything. She nodded, but the ease that had been in that gesture 3 days ago wasn't there anymore. That night, lying awake, she made a decision she didn't say out loud to him. In the morning, she'd order an independent core sample pull from the parking columns. Through her own company, no sign-off from Trevor needed. If he'd been handling it for a week already, he'd have 3 more days to get ahead of the results. She wasn't going to wait on explanations anymore. She was going to get her own numbers. In the morning, Cassie filed a request through Summit Independent Inspections for an independent core pull. Drilling a small cylinder of concrete out of the column and sending it to a lab for strength testing. She bypassed Callahan Construction's internal process. Under the city contract, she had the authority to do it. By lunch, she got a call from the developer's legal department. Ms. Moore, effective today, we have a temporary hold in place, the woman said, in a polite, rehearsed voice. Given the ongoing city inspection, any intervention in the structure, including sample collection, requires legal department sign-off. That's the directive. Whose directive? Project-wide. I'll send you the sign-off form. The form arrived 20 minutes later. 5 line items, 3 signatures required, including Trevor's. She found him in the conference room, on a call, and waited it out.
"I need your signature on the core pull," she said, setting the form in front of him. Trevor looked at the paper, then at her. "Cass, why now? We've got the city breathing down our neck already and you want to drill more holes in the columns? It's a public process. Goes on record." "That's exactly why we need to do it, so there are independent numbers." He sighed, but signed, not right away, reading the language twice. "You know, we're running Iron Peak Mix now, starting this quarter," he said, handing the form back, offhand, not looking up. 15% cheaper. So the cores might be a good idea. You'll confirm everything's fine. She took the signed form without asking about the name. It slid past her, lost in the list of everything else she had going on that day. By evening, a crew from Continental Materials Testing was already drilling the first hole into a column in the underground garage. The procedure went into the site log. Sorensen had official access to it. She found Gary not at the site, but outside the grocery store near his place that evening, coming out with bags. "Got a minute?" she asked. He looked around before answering, a habit she hadn't noticed in him before. "5," he said. "Wife's waiting." "Who told you not to make noise about the report?" He shifted the bags from one hand to the other. "Nobody told me anything, Cassie." "Gary, you're the one who told me not to be alone at the site. People don't say that just to be polite." He was quiet, looking at the pavement. "I've got 2 kids and a mortgage," he said finally, low. "I got told that if I made problems, I'd be replaced by the end of the month. Not Trevor himself, straight out, but word came through one of his guys." "Through who?" He shook his head. "Can't say. Don't want to put someone else on the spot." She wanted to ask more, but he'd already stepped back, adjusting the bags. "You should ask," he said, "where that concrete's actually coming from."
Not who rewrote the report, where the mix itself comes from. What do you mean? But he was already heading for his building, not looking back, and she stood on the sidewalk with a question she didn't have an answer to yet. The results came in on the third day, in an email on Continental Materials Testing's official letterhead. No preamble, dry report language. Column C-17, actual compressive strength, 2,790 pounds per square inch, against a specified strength of 4,000 pounds per square inch. She read the number twice, even though she already knew it. The certified copy had shown roughly the same picture. But this wasn't an archive document. This was a fresh core, just pulled out of the building. It meant the column, today, right now, under the parking level where residents' cars would soon be sitting, was holding less load than it was supposed to. She wrote a short email to Ryan, to Trevor, community to her own file at Summit, attaching the report, one line. Requesting we hold sign-off on this section pending resolution of the discrepancy. No response for almost 2 hours. She drove to the company office herself. Waiting on an email didn't feel right anymore. She heard voices outside Trevor's office before she even opened the door. Not shouting, but not the tone people usually use to talk about delivery schedules either. Ryan was standing by the window, back to the door. Trevor was behind the desk. Both went quiet the second she walked in. "Cass." Ryan turned to her and paused for a second. "We were just going over your email." "And?" Trevor folded his hands on the desk. "We decided you should hear where this discrepancy actually came from," he said, "before we hold sign-off on the section a week ahead of schedule."
Trevor turned his laptop toward her, a spreadsheet of concrete pricing on the screen, a few rows highlighted yellow. "Look," he said, "we've got a fine on Ironwood Commons, almost $2.4 million. Purchasing spent the whole month looking for somewhere to save without cutting payroll. Found a supplier 15% cheaper, same spec on paper, same tolerances, switched over this quarter." "Same spec and the strength is a third under requirement," Cassie said. "It's a one-off deviation. Could have been a bad batch from the plant, it happens," Trevor said, calm, businesslike, like he was talking budget, not collapse risk. "We already ordered a repour batch from the same supplier." "Trevor, we've got 2 independent results on the same structure. Why are you calling it a one-off?" He looked at her, no irritation. "Because we don't know yet what actually happened with that batch. Could be a mix issue at the plant, could be something in transport, could be something else."
"The next batch will tell us. And if the next one comes back the same, then you shut the job down," Trevor said evenly. "I'll sign the report myself." Cassie looked at him for a few seconds. He wasn't arguing with her, wasn't blocking the review, was even offering to sign her report himself if the results held up. "Fine," she said. "I'll wait for the repour results. But if that one's off too, I'm filing officially. No more sign-offs needed." "Deal," Trevor said. Ryan came over, put an arm around her shoulders briefly in front of everyone, a gesture that was supposed to mean support, and she let herself believe it just for a second. 3 quiet days went by, as quiet as 3 days before a wedding no one had called off could be. Her mom called twice a day, working out the seating chart. Cassie went in for the final dress fitting, stood in front of the mirror while the seamstress pinned the hem, thinking not about the dress, but about whether the repour results had come in yet. They hadn't. Ryan brought it up that evening. She hadn't even had to ask. "I've been thinking," he said, pouring the tea. "Even if the second batch comes back to spec, that section with the bad numbers should probably get reinforced anyway, just to be safe. We could do it quietly, on the company's dime, without shutting the job down. Add rebar, pour an extra layer. Nobody living there would ever know there was even a question." "And if the second batch comes back bad too?" "Then we do the same thing for the whole section. More expensive, but doable."
It sounded reasonable, responsible, even caring. Not hiding the problem, just quietly closing it out without scaring anyone before they had to. "When did you actually find out about the supplier switch?"
she asked, just because the question had been sitting there a while, and now there was a real reason to ask directly. Ryan paused for a second with his cup. "From Trevor. When purchasing was working out the budget," he said. "I didn't get into the details. That's not my side of things." She nodded. The answer was ordinary, calm, no different from dozens of other answers he'd given her over the past 2 years. She didn't push on exactly when it had been. "Okay," she said. "We wait for the results." The report results hadn't come by day 5 or day 6. Cassie decided to check herself, through the company server, looking for the parking subcontractor list for her own report, nothing more. The supplier correspondence folder was open to any employee with engineer-level access. She'd used that archive plenty of times herself. A file caught her eye in the list, subject line, C-17, report. She opened it without thinking, on autopilot. An email from Trevor to Alan Foster, sent before her own discovery back in the opening scene, 2 days before she'd ever seen the 2 reports. "Do it the way we agreed, on the dates. Cleared with RV." She read it 3 times. Below it, Foster's short reply, "I'll take care of it tonight." The email was dated exactly 2 days before the second document showed up, with the corrected, worse number. This wasn't a normal decision about switching suppliers. In the email, Trevor was directly instructing someone to alter a document, before there was ever any talk of a bad batch, before Cassie had even found the discrepancy. She screenshotted the email with shaking hands, just on her phone, screen by screen. A minute later, her access to the folder vanished. A message came up. "You no longer have permission to view this section." She sat there looking at the gray placeholder where the folder had been, and what she felt wasn't fear, it was anger. Clean, level anger. The anger of someone who'd just been lied to, right to her face, calmly, over tea, with a tone of concern. She didn't call Ryan, didn't call Trevor. In the morning, she put together a report. The discrepancy between the 2 reports, the file creation dates, the results of the independent cores, and a copy of the correspondence between Trevor and Foster. At the end, she recommended holding sign-off on the section until the cause of the deviation was resolved and a follow-up review was completed. She sent the report through the official channels, to company leadership, to her own file at Summit, and with a copy to Denver Community Planning and Development, as required when a potential structural risk is identified. Ryan called an hour later. "You sent this to the city?" he asked. Not shouting, but the softness from last night's tea was gone from his voice. "Yes. We agreed to wait. We agreed that I'd wait while you handled it."
Turns out there was nothing to handle. Trevor gave the instructions to fake the document before I'd even found anything. Did you know? A pause. Not long, but there. "No," he said. "About the instructions? No, I didn't know." "Okay," she said, though she wasn't sure it was okay at all. "There's a meeting tomorrow. You'll need to be there too." "I know," he said. "Can you just soften the wording on the report? Not falsification, just a discrepancy in the documents, until we know the whole picture." "I already sent it, with the original wording." "Cassie, I'm asking you." "No, Rye. I can't go back and change the wording after the fact just because it's more comfortable for someone." He didn't argue, just said, "Fine," short, tired, and hung up first. The conference room was on the 8th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows in the corner. Outside, the Meridian Park site looked small, almost like a toy from that height.
Walt joined by video call. The doctor had only cleared him for half an hour, no more. Ryan sat next to Trevor, both across from Cassie. Nathan Cole came in last, took the head of the table, and opened his laptop right away. "Go ahead," he said. Cassie laid out the report, short and factual. 2 reports, file creation dates, the independent core results, the correspondence. Her voice didn't shake. She'd rehearsed this in the car, out loud, alone. Cole listened without interrupting, then checked his watch. As I understand it, we're talking about an indefinite delay on this section, he said. My draw is tied to the sign-off date. If that date slips, the next phase of financing slips with it. That affects the whole project, not just the garage. This is about structural safety, Cassie said. I hear that, Cole said evenly. But I need actual numbers. How serious is the deviation? What's the proposed fix? The building needs to be safe isn't an answer. Trevor leaned forward. Can I say something? He looked at Cassie, not hostile, more like there was regret in his voice. It's not just about the concrete. Cassie felt something shift in the room, barely noticeable, but she caught it. The eyes at the table drifted, just slightly, off the documents and onto her. Trevor turned a second laptop toward the table, not his usual work one, a separate one, with printed pages next to it. We have a finding from an independent party, he said. We ordered a second review from another accredited lab, not Front Range. Result: 3,960 pounds per square inch, basically to spec. Cassie frowned. That's not possible. The cores came from the same columns, days apart. The core was only 12 inches long, Trevor said, calm. At that diameter, that length-to-diameter ratio requires a correction under the applicable testing standard. You can't just compare that result directly with a properly prepared core. She was quiet for a second. Until we know both cores were pulled and tested under the same protocol, she said, neither number proves anything. Send me the sampling report, she said. I will, Trevor said, nodding. I'm not saying you made a mistake. I'm saying this is more complicated than it looks. Cole checked his watch again. So we've got 2 findings that contradict each other, he said. And I need a decision today. With respect, Trevor said, addressing the whole table now, not just Cassie. I understand where the concern's coming from. 6 years ago, Cassie lost a colleague on another job. I don't want to get into the details, it's personal, but it's possible she's reacting more strongly than the situation calls for. That's understandable, human nature. The room went quiet. That has nothing to do with the numbers on the screen, Cassie said, trying to keep her voice level. Agreed, Trevor said, gently. That's exactly why I'm not arguing with the numbers. I'm proposing we wait on a repull with a properly prepared core before we shut the job down. Cassie turned to Ryan, waiting for him to say even one word in her favor. He was looking at the table, saying nothing. Ryan stayed quiet. Nobody at the table was in a hurry to break the silence. I don't think Cassie is unqualified, he said finally in an even voice, like he was reading from something he'd prepared. But right now, she's in a difficult emotional place. It would be more appropriate to step her back from the process temporarily, for the sake of an objective review, until the repull gives us a clear answer. He didn't look at her while he said it. He was looking at Cole. Agreed, Cole said quickly, like he'd been waiting for exactly that. Special Inspector Moore's access to the site is suspended pending the repull results. Officially, retroactively, we'll log it as a scheduled rotation.
On the video call, Walt didn't say anything. He was looking off to the side, like it was hard for him to look at the camera. Cassie looked at Ryan one more time. He still wasn't meeting her eyes. Fine, she said. She stood up, gathered her papers into the folder, slowly, no rush, even though everything inside her wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. At the door, she turned around. Send me the sampling report, she said. You said you would. Nobody answered. She left and closed the door quietly, without a sound. Before we go on, if you're enjoying this one, take a second to like it and drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from. Now, back to Cassie. In the morning, her badge didn't work at the turnstile at the side entrance. She tapped it again. Same red light. Temporary hold, the guard said, not looking at her. "You should have gotten a call." Nobody had called. She called Gary. He didn't pick up.
Called HR. They said her access was under review and to check back Monday. She stood at the turnstile for a minute, then turned around and walked back to her car. At lunch, an email came in from Callahan Construction's press office. Scheduled rotation of special inspectors as the project nears completion. Cassie read the line twice, then the next one. Additional independent quality review for the full confidence of future residents. She recognized her own report, except now there wasn't a single test report left in it. Not one number, not a word about risk. Just scheduled rotation and confidence of future residents. That evening she took her wedding dress out of the closet, looked at it, and put it back. The wedding was supposed to be in 4 days. Nobody had called it off. At home, alone, she pulled a box off the top shelf of her closet that she hadn't opened in 6 years. Inside, a folder of documents from the case about the formwork collapse at Riverbend Commons.
The committee's findings, witness interview transcripts, her own handwritten statements from back then. She read slowly, page by page. The official conclusion had been short, a failure in how the shoring was installed, responsibility falling on the framing crew and, in part, on the special inspector who hadn't caught the issue in time. She knew that conclusion by heart. For 6 years, she'd carried it around as a fact about herself, not as a line in a document. At the back of the folder, among the attachments, was a list of material suppliers on the project. She flipped through it fast, not lingering. She wasn't looking for this. One name caught her eye and stuck: Bedrock Building Materials. Next to it, in the ownership column, a few names, one of them, R. Voigt. Her fingers stopped on the line. R. Voigt. The initials from Trevor's email. Cassie read the name again. Coincidence? Just that, for now. She closed the folder. With her access suspended, Cassie suddenly had time she hadn't had before. She decided to use it to look into Iron Peak. She sat down at her laptop at home and pulled up the Colorado Secretary of State's business entity search. Typed in Iron Peak Concrete. The company had been registered 3 years ago. Owner, Roman Voigt, 100%. Registered address, Unit 14, Rail Yard Industrial Park, on the edge of town. She opened a second window and typed in Bedrock Building Materials, the name from the old folder. The company showed up as dissolved 5 years ago. On the dissolution filing, at the bottom, the same address, Unit 14, Rail Yard Industrial Park. She stared at the 2 addresses and couldn't call it proof. The industrial park was big. That unit could have had 10 different tenants. Matching addresses weren't a matching name, weren't a matching scheme. Just one number sitting next to another. But the name wasn't just a random line on a list anymore. It was the name of the man standing behind both companies. The current supplier at Meridian Park and the supplier at Riverbend Commons 6 years ago. She didn't call Sorensen. Decided she'd call when she had more than 2 matching addresses. Her phone rang on its own that evening from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Moore," said a familiar, even voice. "Sorensen, not about work. You got 5 minutes?" They met at a coffee shop a block from her place. Not an office, not the site, a table by the window where nobody but the waitress paid them any attention. "I saw you searched Iron Peak today." "How would you know that?" "We have access to search records for companies tied to sites we're reviewing." "You watching the registry or watching me?" "Certain kinds of companies," he said. "Iron Peak's one of the addresses I've been tracking for a while." She told him about Riverbend Commons, briefly, just the facts, nothing that didn't matter. About Bedrock, about the address.
Sorensen listened without interrupting, took notes in a paper notebook, not a tablet. "Let's do this," he said, closing the notebook. "Same time tomorrow, same place. I need to check something tonight before we go further." She agreed. That evening, Foster called. She hadn't saved the number, but she recognized the voice right away, rushed, on edge. "Ms. Moore, I need to show you something, not over the phone." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Come to the container yard behind the warehouse at Rail Yard, Unit 14. I'll be there at 8. Unit 14. Same address as the one in the registry. She got there at 5 to 8. Foster wasn't there. She called. Long rings, then a mechanical voice. "The subscriber you were trying to reach is temporarily unavailable." She waited 40 minutes, watching the closed warehouse gate, and left without seeing him. Sorensen showed up at the coffee shop with a folder, worn, clearly old, edges frayed.
"5 years ago, I filed a memo about Bedrock," he said, setting the folder on the table but not opening it. "Off the back of a review on a different site, not yours. The memo never went anywhere. I got pulled off that beat 2 months later." "Why didn't it go anywhere?" "Officially, not enough grounds. What actually happened? I don't know. I can only guess." He opened the folder anyway. Inside, a list of sites, dates, short notes in his own handwriting. "I've been tracking this on my own ever since. On my own time, without any official standing on most of what's in here. Iron Peak got registered 2 years after Bedrock dissolved. Same warehouse address, part of the same subcontracted lab. Over 3 years, at least 4 sites with similar strength deviations that I've been able to find." "4, including ours?" "5, including yours," he said. "And Riverbend Commons, if what you told me yesterday holds up, 6. That one was first. 6 years before the rest."
She sat quiet, looking at the list of dates in his notebook. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Yesterday you barely talked to me." "Yesterday I didn't know if I could trust you," he said simply. "Today I do. You filed an official report instead of trying to settle it quietly. That's not what people who can be bought do." She thought back to his site visit. Dry, no explanation, that sudden request for the reports specifically on C-17. At the time, it had felt like pressure. Now, it felt like the only way to get his hands on the documents before someone had a chance to rewrite them again. "Does the name Bedrock Building Materials mean anything to you beyond the address?" he asked. "The owner," she said. "Roman Voigt." She said the name out loud for the first time, and it was harder than she expected. "Voigt," Sorensen repeated. "On paper, just a businessman. No record, no open cases. Owner of 2 other companies, both active." "That doesn't prove anything."
"Not yet," he agreed. "The address and the name are a coincidence that needs an explanation. On its own, it doesn't prove anything. But the same guy keeps turning up connected to the same kind of problem too many times." Cassie pulled out her phone, showed him a photo of a page from the old folder, the supplier list for Riverbend Commons. Sorensen studied the photo carefully. "I've never seen this," he said. "I never had access to that case file. It's closed, archived." "What do I do with it?" "Nothing sudden," he said. "If Voigt finds out someone's connected his 2 addresses in the same week, he'll clear out everything he can before we've got enough for anything official." "What about Foster? He never showed." Sorensen looked at her more closely. "I don't like that," he said. "Usually people either show up or reschedule. They don't just go quiet." He wrote something in his notebook, short. "Be careful," he said, getting up from the table.
"If this is who I think it is, he doesn't like outsiders in his business, and you're not an outsider to him anymore." She was the one who suggested meeting the next day. Didn't wait for Sorensen to call, texted him first. They met in his car, parked a block from the inspection office. He handed her a folder over the seat. A list of sites, inspection dates, short handwritten notes. Complaint withdrawn. Review closed, insufficient grounds. Employee resigned voluntarily. "This is what I've put together over 5 years," he said. "Officially, almost none of it's confirmed. People are scared to talk. Cassie copied the list of sites into a notebook and that evening, at home, called 2 engineers she knew at other companies. Without saying why exactly, just asking if they'd worked with Iron Peak and if anything about the strength reports had looked off. One didn't say anything concrete. The other, after a pause, said, "Look, I'm not talking about this on the phone. Let's meet up." By morning, her list had grown by 2 more sites, not from Sorensen's folder, from her own calls. She sent him a photo of the list. He called back 10 minutes later. "Where'd this come from?" Asked around. Turns out it wasn't that hard. He didn't say anything right away, but the pause told her he was surprised. "Weddings in 2 days," she said, changing the subject. "I still haven't decided what to tell Ryan about all this." "That's your call," Sorensen said. "But if you're going to tell him, don't give him half the truth. In a situation like this, leaving things out just makes it worse." They started meeting almost every day. Coffee shops, his car, once at the city archive, where Sorensen got access to old records on municipal sites. Some of the older files hadn't been digitized yet. Cassie sorted papers by year. Sorensen cross-checked company names against the registry. They worked in long stretches of silence, then traded short lines. "Look, same registered agent." "No, different companies, just similar names." One evening, he brought 2 cups of coffee, not asking what she drank, and one turned out to have milk in it, exactly the way she took it. She didn't ask how he knew, probably noticed the last time, when she'd ordered in front of him. "Thanks," she said, simply. He nodded and went back to the papers. Late that night, when she was getting ready to leave, her phone buzzed. The same number that had texted her a few days earlier and then gone quiet. "Ms. Moore, sorry for the silence. Tomorrow, 8, same address. I have what you need, Foster." She showed the message to Sorensen. "We go together," he said, "not alone." Foster was waiting for them at the container yard, same jacket as before, except this time his hands were in his pockets and he kept glancing at the entrance.
"Sorry I didn't show up last time," he said shortly, not looking at either of them. "There were circumstances. Don't want to get into it right now." Cassie didn't push. He held out a flash drive, small, black, unlabeled. 3 years of correspondence on here, not just your job. Some data on a couple of others, too. I saved it for myself, just in case. "Why are you doing this?" Cassie asked. "Because I'm tired of faking documents and then watching people move into buildings I know something about that they don't," Foster said. "I'm quitting today, moving to another state to stay with my sister. You won't find me after this, and don't try." He walked off fast, no goodbye, almost running to his car at the exit. Sorensen took the drive, wrapped it in a handkerchief, tucked it inside his jacket. "We'll look at it at your place," he said. "Not here." Cassie glanced back at the empty lot, at the closed warehouse gate, at the spot where a man she now knew nothing about except his name had just put his job, and maybe a lot more, on the line. Ryan didn't come home that night. After the conversation with Cassie, he'd texted that he was staying at the office. She didn't answer. They opened the files late that night, at Cassie's place, on her laptop, Sorensen sitting next to her at the same table. The correspondence spanned 3 years, dozens of emails between Foster and various recipients, some about Meridian Park, some about other jobs, names Cassie had never heard before. One file was just labeled Riverbend. She didn't open it right away. Her hand hovered over the trackpad longer than it needed to. Inside, a delivery ticket for concrete batch 114, delivered to the Riverbend Commons site in October, 6 years ago. Delivery date? 4 days before the formwork collapse. Supplier? Bedrock Building Materials.
Next to it, in a separate email, a short exchange between a lab technician and someone whose name was hidden behind initials. Batch 114, understrength, logged it as compliant, verbal agreement. Cassie stared at the screen for a long time, not moving. "This doesn't prove the concrete caused the collapse," Sorensen said quietly. "There's usually more than one cause." "I know," she said, "but the official version only ever talked about the shoring, the human factor, about me not catching it in time." And now we've got another possible cause. Nobody looked at this one back then. She sat there quietly for a few more seconds. So it wasn't me, she said out loud, more to herself than to him. Headlights swept past the window. A car crept by the house and stopped a little farther down, by the next building, engine still running. The car sat by the neighboring entrance for about 10 minutes, engine idling, then turned around and drove off. Cassie couldn't make out who was driving. In the morning, she asked the neighbor downstairs if she'd seen a strange car in the lot last night. The neighbor shrugged. Who knows who's visiting who? Cassie let it go. She went back to the laptop. Sorensen was already at the table, sorting the printouts from Foster's drive by year. Look at this, he said, not looking up. I spent all evening checking Iron Peak's filings against their delivery volumes. Something doesn't add up. How do you mean? I mean, the markup on concrete, even understrength concrete, doesn't explain their revenue the last 2 years. That's too much money for a company that's supposedly just selling building material. Cassie sat down next to him, pulled one of the sheets closer. Maybe they've got some other business on the side. Maybe, Sorensen said, but then it should show up in the filings somewhere. And there's nothing here but concrete, on paper. She looked at the numbers. Last year's profit was roughly 40% higher than even a very aggressive markup on their delivery volume could explain. So where's the money coming from? Sorensen didn't answer right away. He pulled the next sheet closer, where a short mention sat that had slipped past both of them before. Northgate. Northgate, Cassie repeated. Who's that? Sorensen already had the business registry pulled up on his laptop. Co-owner of a few companies, he said, clicking through entries one after another. Look, this one went bankrupt 2 years ago. This one changed hands a year and a half ago. This one too. And what's Iron Peak got to do with it? Not sure yet, but the name showed up in their internal correspondence. Here, an email from last year, subject line, NCP settlement. The initials match.
Cassie scrolled through the list of companies to the end. 4 total, and in 3 out of 4 the same pattern repeated. Financial trouble first, then a change in ownership within a year or two. Maybe it's just an investment firm buying up distressed assets, she said. That's legal. Legal, Sorensen agreed. If they're not the ones creating the distress in the first place. He opened one more entry, a company called Garrison Builders, which had changed owners 4 years back. On the list of former co-owners, one name, M. Reese. I think I know where to find her, Sorensen said. Cassie looked at the list of companies a few more seconds. What if it's already happening to Meridian too? She said out loud. Sorensen didn't answer. He was quiet long enough that Cassie understood. The question hadn't struck him as stupid. Too early to say, he said finally. We've got a matching pattern at other companies. We don't know yet if it's been applied to Meridian. But we could check.
We could, he said, but that takes internal company records, not a public registry. Trevor's not going to hand those over easily. Cassie nodded, looking at the list again. 4 companies, 4 stories, practically identical. 3 of them, at registration, had listed the same address, Unit 14, Rail Yard Industrial Park. Same unit, she said. Same, Sorensen confirmed. Doesn't look like a coincidence, looks like a habit. People don't change addresses much when one's working out for them. He wrote down a name in his notebook, M. Reese, and a phone number he found through mutual contacts from Monica's old job. She's working as a hired manager somewhere else now, he said, keeping a low profile, no press. If we're going to call, I'll call. Better that way. Monica Reese came to the meeting at a coffee shop on the edge of town, sat with her back to the wall, facing the door, and spent the whole conversation glancing at it. I don't want my name coming up anywhere, she said right away. I've got a normal job now. I've got something to lose. We understand, Sorensen said. We just want to know what happened with Garrison Builders. Monica was quiet for a long moment, turning her cup in her hands. Cassie told her the story, briefly, Riverbend, Iron Peak, what was happening now at Meridian. Not to guilt her into talking, because it felt like the conversation wouldn't move otherwise. Monica listened without interrupting and seemed to relax her shoulders a little. 4 years ago, we had a cash flow crunch, she said finally. Fine for a missed deadline, credit drying up, bank wouldn't lend. A guy showed up, offered help, material below market, financial support. We signed an agreement. Standard, boilerplate. I didn't even read the whole thing. Our lawyer did, said it was fine. And then what happened? A year and a half, nothing. Then demands started showing up that we'd never even heard of. Turns out the agreement had a clause about a right to purchase equity under certain conditions. We didn't even notice we'd hit those conditions. You still have the agreement? Cassie asked. Monica looked at her for a long moment. I think so, she said. Not where you'd expect. I scanned it for myself back then, just in case. Give me a day. The scan came in the next evening to Sorensen's email, subject line blank. The document was titled Master Support and Financing Agreement. The first 3 pages, standard supply terms, pricing, timelines, nothing unusual. Sorensen kept scrolling, stopped on page 4, and read out loud. Upon the occurrence of any of the following: default on debt obligations exceeding 30 days, failure to meet the project completion deadline, or the occurrence of circumstances causing material reputational harm to the company, Party B, that's Northgate Capital Partners, shall have the right to purchase an ownership stake in Party A at the price set forth in Exhibit 3. He read it again, slower. Exhibit 3. Sorensen scrolled to the end of the document. No exhibit, just a blank reference. The main piece is missing, he said, but the shape of it is clear enough. Cheap material, financial help, and in exchange, the right to buy the company out cheap if anything goes wrong. They give you money, and then they collect equity when you run into trouble. Cassie looked at the list of trigger conditions: default, missed deadlines, reputational harm. So it benefits them if trouble happens? That's exactly what I'd be checking now.
The fine on Ironwood Commons, she said out loud. Trevor mentioned it way back at the start. Default, missed deadlines. Meridian already had all of that, before the concrete thing even started. Sorensen looked at her. Then the question isn't whether this scheme was applied to you, he said. It's when. In the data from Foster's Drive, Cassie found a reference to another project, a residential complex called Cherry Creek Landing, also supplied by Iron Peak. The correspondence mentioned a repour batch replacing a rejected one. In the public city registry, there was no test report on file for that repour batch at all. She decided to check it herself, not waiting for Sorensen. He was on another call, and the property management office at Cherry Creek Landing was 20 minutes away. The office administrator, a woman in her 40s, let her in without much question. A special inspector's credential carried its own weight.
She even helped Cassie find the right pages in the sign-off log, laid them out on the desk. Cassie was photographing page after page when the administrator's phone rang. Yes, she said. Listened, her expression changed. Yes, understood. She hung up and looked at Cassie differently now. I'm sorry, she said. I need you to stop and leave the office. Direction from above. I just need a couple more minutes. Right now, please. Cassie didn't argue. She went out into the hallway, but instead of heading for the exit, turned into the next building, still under construction. There, on one of the parking columns, there should be a batch stamp she wanted to check against the number in the log. She found the column, photographed the stamp on the concrete, and turned back. The property office door was already locked. The lights on the floor went out, all at once. She pulled out her phone. One call didn't go through, neither did the second.
Inside the building, the signal was almost non-existent. She felt her way along the wall, hand on the cold concrete, until she found a door marked Exit, the paint almost worn away in the dark. Behind it was an unfinished stairwell, missing a handrail on one side. She went down slowly, close to the wall, slipped once and scraped her arm on the edge of a form panel. At the bottom, a gate, and beyond it, the street. Sorensen's car was waiting at the curb. "You were off the grid for 40 minutes, he said when she reached him. "You said you wouldn't go anywhere alone." "I don't owe you a report on where I go." "I know." He looked at the scrape on her arm. "Then why are you mad?" "Because you're talking to me like I should have asked your permission first." "That's not it." "Then what is it?" He looked at her. "I was scared. You were inside a building that just locked itself around you. Your phone wasn't answering. I didn't know where you were." Cassie glanced down at her arm. "I'm fine."
"I can see that." He opened the car door for her. The full case file on Riverbend Commons wasn't publicly accessible. It existed only within Denver building inspections, with the investigator who'd worked it 6 years ago and had long since retired. Sorensen found a way to get a copy through an old colleague. Cassie read the witness statement transcript at home, alone at the table, Sorensen across from her with a cup of cold coffee. She didn't recognize her own testimony at first. Reading the transcript felt like someone else had written it 6 years ago, in another life. In one spot, among the other answers, was a line she'd said in passing back then, without emphasis. The follow-up inspection of the shoring anchors was scheduled for October 14th, moved to the 15th due to a scheduling conflict with another site. The formwork collapsed overnight between the 14th and the 15th. She read that line 3 times. "I was supposed to go on the 14th, she said out loud.
Not the 15th. I moved the inspection back a day because I was still covering the Foundry District. I physically couldn't be in 2 places at once. Sorensen didn't say anything, didn't try to jump in right away. If I'd gone on schedule, she went on, I might have caught the crack in the connection sooner, might have been able to do something. Maybe, he said quietly, or maybe not. The anchor was tied into a block from batch 114, the bad one. It wouldn't have held either way. It was only a matter of time. That doesn't erase the fact that I moved the inspection. It doesn't, he agreed. Both things are true at the same time. That happens. Cassie closed the folder. I should have gone a day earlier, she said finally, not to Sorensen, to the empty room. That's true, but I didn't kill Sam. Sorensen didn't say anything, didn't try to comfort her, didn't ask questions, just stayed there. They met with Trevor not at the office, in his car, in a parking garage at a shopping center, where he'd agreed to come after a long back and forth on the phone. I've got 10 minutes, he said, not looking at either of them. Cassie laid out the printouts on the dash, the correspondence with Foster, the delivery ticket for batch 114, the financial mismatch at Iron Peak. I've already seen this, Trevor said. Nothing new. There's something new, Cassie said. Northgate Capital, an option on the company's equity, tied to certain conditions. Same scheme's been used on at least 3 other developers over the last few years. Trevor was quiet a beat longer than the question called for. How do you know about that? Trevor was looking at her differently now. So you know what I'm talking about. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, even with the window up. You don't understand, he said, and his voice had lost its earlier confidence. If this gets out, they don't just take equity. They take everything the Callahans have. Legally. On paper, I signed myself. When did you sign it? 1.5 years ago. The fine on Ironwood. The loan was maxed out. The bank wouldn't lend. Some people showed up, offered help. I signed, figured it was temporary. I'd sort it out later. And the concrete? Trevor took a drag. The concrete's a consequence. Of what? You're not going to stop until you hear it. I'm not. After the option, they started leaning on me. First through purchasing, then through timelines, then... He stopped. Then what? Then I realized I couldn't get out of it, Trevor said. About 6 months after the option, they started making demands. Use our supplier, agree to the terms, don't make waves. I couldn't say no. They threatened to exercise the option early, find some excuse. Cassie looked at him. Not pity exactly, but something close to it. Ryan knew about the concrete, Trevor said, stubbing out the cigarette in the ashtray. And about the option? Trevor looked at her. No, he didn't know about that. Cassie showed up at Ryan's without warning. The first time in a long time she'd come over for a reason that had nothing to do with the job. He opened the door, saw her face, and stepped aside without a word. She told him about the concrete, short version. He listened, nodding. He already knew, had already admitted as much. Then she said the word option, and Ryan sat down on the arm of the couch like his legs had stopped holding him evenly. What do you mean, an option? She explained, briefly, just the facts, no extra words. Ryan was quiet for a long time. Cassie watched his face change, not dramatically, just a man understanding the scale of what he'd just heard. Dad, he said finally, if this is real, he loses everything he spent 30 years building. Not because of the concrete scandal, because of a piece of paper Trevor signed, not him. I don't know all the details of the document. We only have a template of a similar agreement used against a different company. Ryan ran a hand over his face. I need your help, he said, not as your fiancé. As the expert I still think I can trust, even after all this. Rye, she said quietly, I'll help sort out the documents. That doesn't mean anything's changed between us. I understand, he said. I'm still asking. She nodded. The board formally reached out to Summit Independent Inspections requesting an independent review of the company's internal documents, a formality behind which sat Ryan's personal request, but structured so Cassie could step into it as a specialist, not as a fiancé. She called him herself to confirm the terms. I'm doing this for the company and for Walt, she said flatly. It doesn't mean I'm coming back to you. I understand, Ryan said. That evening she had dinner with her mother. Pouring the tea, her mom carefully asked if Cassie was thinking about moving back in with Ryan. Since you two are working together again anyway. There's probably not going to be a wedding, Mom, Cassie said. Her mother didn't argue, didn't try to talk her out of it, just nodded and topped off her tea like they were discussing ordinary, mildly unpleasant news, not a year of planning falling apart. Cassie was more surprised by that than she expected to be. That evening a text came in from Sorensen. Found the guy who handled the legal side of Monica's deal with them. He'll talk, but only once and only to me. Cassie went to see Walt herself to tell him about the option directly, knowing this couldn't stay hidden any longer, especially now that she was officially involved as a specialist. A year and a half ago, he repeated once she'd finished. Trevor signed this without me and without Ryan. Yes. He was quiet for a long time, looking out the window. My whole life I thought the company had to be protected at any cost, he said. Whenever a problem came up, I'd put off dealing with it if that bought us time. The main thing was never to stop. The rest, I figured, could be sorted out later. He paused. Looks like I was wrong. Cassie didn't say anything. I'm the one who taught all of you to think that way, Walt went on. Trevor just took that logic all the way to the end. She didn't know how to answer that. He walked her to the door, shook her hand, firm, the way he always did. The call came late that night. Ryan's voice, fast, unsteady. Dad's not doing well. Ambulance is on the way. She went. In the waiting room, Ryan sat in a plastic chair, hands clasped. She sat next to him, not touching him, but not pulling away either. The doctor came out an hour later. He was stable but needed a few days of observation. Cassie stepped into the hallway for some air.
A man in an expensive but understated suit was standing by the window. She'd never seen him before. Ms. Moore? He asked. We haven't met, he said. Roman Voigt. She didn't find words right away. The name was familiar from the documents, from her conversations with Sorensen. In person, he looked strangely ordinary. A short man in his 50s, even voice, expensive but understated watch. How do you know I'm here? She asked. Small town, he said, not really answering. Heard about Walt. Wanted to pay my respects. We crossed paths on business years ago. What do you want? Nothing, he said. I'm just talking. Although, It'll be interesting to see whether the company stays a family business after all this. He said it in the same even tone as everything else, not a threat, more like light, almost academic curiosity. Are you threatening me? No, he said. I don't owe you an explanation, and I'm not asking for anything.
He nodded like he was saying goodbye and walked to the elevator, unhurried, not looking back. Cassie stayed by the window. She kept turning his last line over in her head. Whether the company stays a family business, how did he know she was here? And why had that line sounded like he already knew a lot more than he should? Sorensen got pulled off the Meridian Park job, the same wording they'd once used on Cassie, scheduled rotation. He called her himself short. I'm off the case, officially. Because of me? Because of the case. Don't tie those together. That evening she went to see him, not to talk about the investigation, just to check in. Small apartment, one bookshelf, an almost empty kitchen. How are you doing? She asked, still in the doorway. Been better, he said, and gave her a half smile. They drank coffee at the kitchen table, barely talking about the case, about his old apartment, about why he still hadn't bought himself a decent coffee maker. An ordinary conversation, the kind they'd almost never had before. On her way out, she noticed a printout on the table with the city letterhead on it, a document a suspended inspector shouldn't have. What's that? She asked, nodding at it. Sorensen tucked it into a folder quickly. I'll tell you later, he said, not now. She didn't push, but she remembered the line. 2 days later, she was walking past the government building on unrelated business and spotted Sorensen at a coffee shop across the street. He was coming out of a meeting room with a man in a suit she recognized as the attorney who'd represented Cole's interests at a meeting a few months back. Cassie stopped across the street, didn't go over. Sorensen shook the attorney's hand, said something, and they went their separate ways. She didn't go over and didn't text right away, drove home, put the kettle on, sat down at the table. That evening she sent a text. Saw you today.
Who were you meeting with and why didn't you tell me? No answer for 2 hours. She sat with her phone on the table, staring at the screen like that might make the reply come faster. Her thoughts kept circling. Maybe he was running his own negotiations. Maybe he was working out some protection for himself off the back of the case. Maybe he just didn't want to drag her into whatever he'd gotten himself into. None of the versions felt final. But for the first time in all this, she genuinely didn't know what to expect from his answer. He showed up without calling, late, just after 10. I should have texted you right away, he said from the doorway. I'm sorry. Who were you meeting with? Cole's attorney. Cole's doing his own dig into Meridian's finances. He's scared for his draw. That guy in the car outside your place early on was his analyst, nothing to do with Voight. She stayed quiet, listening. I didn't tell you ahead of time because I was worried, Sorensen went on.
If you'd met with his attorney directly, someone could have claimed later that you were getting materials from an interested party. That would have called your independence into question as an expert. I wanted to protect you from that. I get why you did it, she said. But don't decide for me what I need to know. I can decide for myself what to do with information. You're right, he said. Won't happen again. Cole's attorney, after talking with Sorensen, agreed to hand over some of the financial records, quietly, unofficially, more in his own client's interest than in the interest of getting to the truth. Ryan, for his part, brought in the company's internal documents, not as a peace offering, he said right away, but because he wanted to see this through, whatever it cost him. The three of them, Cassie, Sorensen, Ryan, found the document late one night, papers spread out on the table in Cassie's apartment. The master agreement, signed by Trevor a year and a half earlier.
Structure, identical to Monica's document. Trigger condition, the occurrence of circumstances causing material reputational harm, confirmed by an official investigation. That's already happened, Ryan said quietly. Because of your report, because of the review. Cassie didn't answer right away. I don't regret filing the report, she said finally. I just didn't think it would set off something else. The next day, a courier knocked on Ryan's door with a certified letter. Notice from Northgate Capital. Initiation of the process to exercise the option. Date sent, the day after the first news story broke about the scandal. The emergency administrative review of the concrete issue, conducted through Denver Community Planning and Development, went about the way it was always going to go once all the material had been gathered. Iron Peak's attorneys tried to challenge some of the evidence.
Pierce, called as a witness, admitted under the weight of the documents that he'd looked the other way on early warning signs about the company 5 years earlier. The connection between Iron Peak and the dissolved bedrock building materials was officially confirmed. Trevor was taken into custody that same day on document falsification charges. Iron Peak's license was suspended pending investigation. After the hearing, Ryan came up to Cassie. "You were right," he said, "about all of it." She nodded, not answering this time. She was tired of saying the same thing over and over. That evening, she and Sorensen sat down for dinner without a single folder on the table for the first time in a long while. An ordinary table at an ordinary place, talking about nothing in particular. His old apartment, her plans for the weekend, if she ever got one. "I think that's it," she said, looking at him across the table. "I think we actually got through this."
He smiled. The first real smile all evening. No leftover worry behind it. Her phone rang in her pocket at 9:30. Ryan. "They didn't stop," he said, his voice strung tight. "Notary sent a response. The process is officially underway. We've got 12 days. Before we go on, quick thing. If this story's landing for you, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, back to Cassie and Ryan. Ryan had the company's articles and bylaws spread across the table. He'd clearly been up all night going through them, judging by the circles under his eyes. "Look at this," he said in the morning, when Cassie and Sorensen arrived. "Deals of this size need sign-off from all the company's owners, including Dad. And at the time Trevor signed the agreement, Dad hadn't formally handed him and me full authority for deals like that yet. That transfer went into effect 2 months later." Sorensen took the bylaws, flipped through, found the relevant clause. "If that's right," he said, "you've got grounds to challenge the whole document as signed without authority. That could void the option entirely." "Could," Ryan said, "if we can get the resolution that laid out the authority with an exact date. It should be on file with our contractor license. That's held in the same records archive where Pierce used to work." Cassie looked at the calendar on the wall. "We've got 12 days. "And 3 are already gone," Ryan said. Ryan submitted the official request for the authority resolution through the company's attorney the next morning. The reply came back a day later, unusually fast for a records request like that. "Document lost during the 2021 archive relocation." "Too fast," Sorensen said, reading the letter. "Requests like that usually take a week, sometimes 2. Somebody was in a hurry to answer." He got permission to review not the resolution itself, but the archive's checkout log. Who had taken the file out before and when? The log showed the folder had been checked out a month and a half earlier. Before any of this started with the concrete, before anyone could have known about Cassie or her report. "So the document's not lost," Cassie said. "Somebody pulled it ahead of time." Sorensen studied the signature in the log and frowned. "I know this name," he said. "That's Pierce's assistant, the one standing next to him at the hearing. Why would he want that folder a month and a half ago? Nobody knew anything about the option back then." "Maybe it wasn't about the option," Sorensen said. "Maybe it was about something of his own." They found him at home, not at work. Went that evening, no warning, knowing an official request through the clerk's office would just give him time to prepare. The man opened the door reluctantly, stood in the doorway, didn't invite them in. "I don't remember anything about a folder," he said. Sorensen pulled out the printout of the checkout log and set it on the threshold in front of him. "There's your signature, the date, The file number. The man stared at the sheet for a long time. I'm not giving you anything. Then we'll formally request the log, your signature, and an explanation of why an archived document ended up at your house. The man looked at them. You don't understand. If this folder surfaces, I'm the one who takes the fall. And if it doesn't surface, you might take the fall anyway. He stared at the printout a while longer. Fine, he said, sitting down on a stool in the entryway like his legs had given out. I took the folder. When the first rumors about the Iron Peak Review started going around this summer, I got scared. There's a memo in that file from 5 years back. I wrote it myself, for Pierce. It shows we already had warning signs about violations back then, and we didn't act on them.
Where's the folder now? He got up, went into another room, came back with a cardboard folder worn at the corners. Take it, he said. I'm tired of being scared someone would find it before I could. Cassie opened the folder right there in the entryway, flipped to the page she needed, the authority resolution, the date stamped clearly in the corner. She checked it against the date on the copy of the option agreement Trevor had eventually handed over to investigators. The resolution's dated only 2 days before Trevor signed the option, she told Sorensen. So either he didn't know about the new restriction, or he knew and ignored it. Doesn't matter which one at this point, Sorensen said. For the court, what matters is the fact itself. Northgate's attorney was the last one to stand. Trevor signed the agreement as chief operating officer, he said. From our side, he looked like someone with the authority to do that.
If we void this agreement now over Meridian's internal governance rules, every major contract becomes retroactively challengeable. Callahan Construction's attorney, the older woman they'd brought on a week earlier, answered calmly. This isn't just an internal rule. Northgate's own agreement states that transferring an equity stake requires separate approval from the owners. You wrote that clause yourselves, which means you knew one signature from Trevor wasn't enough. The judge kept reading through the documents, not looking up. Northgate's attorney tried to add something else. The judge stopped him with a short gesture. The room went quiet. For the first time in the whole hearing, Ryan looked up from the documents. The judge set the papers down. The court finds that the attempted transfer of the shares was unauthorized and cannot be enforced against the company, he said. Ryan let out a breath. Cassie closed the folder in her lap. For a second, it felt like it was over.
Outside, it was drizzling. She was standing on the courthouse steps when she heard footsteps behind her. Cass. Ryan caught up to her, no coat. What? He held out his phone, not saying anything. On the screen, an old text exchange with Trevor, dated almost 2 years back. In it, Trevor writes, "Hey, I got myself into something to cover the hole from Ironwood. If it comes to it, I'll handle it myself. You don't know anything, all right?" And Ryan's reply, one word. "Okay." Cassie read it for a few seconds, not looking up. "You knew," she said, "this whole time." She didn't ask again right then, just turned and walked to her car, and that evening drove to his place herself. "Did you know?" she asked from the doorway. He didn't answer right away. "Rye, I'm asking, did you know?" "Yes." "That Trevor was hiding something?" "Yes." "And you stayed quiet?" "Yes." Cassie looked at him for a few seconds. "What about the option?" "No, I didn't know about the option." She looked at him. He stood in the middle of the room where, 6 months ago, they'd picked out the wedding menu. "You knew this whole time, and you were still going to marry me?" "Yes." "And you looked me in the eye the whole time?" "Yes." He didn't try to defend himself, not about his dad, not about the company. Just stood there and let her look at him. "I'm not asking if you were scared," she said. "I can see that you were. I'm asking who you were protecting." "The company," he said. "Dad?"
You weren't protecting me, Rye. You just decided what to tell me and what to keep from me. That's not caring for someone. That's a choice you made for me without asking. He sat down, head in his hands. When Trevor first mentioned the supplier, he said, I didn't connect it to anything, just filed it away as cheap concrete, not my problem, purchasing's call. Then, months later, you were telling me about Riverbend over dinner one night, about Sam, and it clicked. I remembered where I'd heard something like that name before. Cassie went still. And you didn't say anything. I told myself maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it doesn't mean anything. He looked up at her. It was easier to think it was a coincidence than to picture you digging in and finding something that would break you all over again. I told myself I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself, Rye. It was easier for you to stay quiet. He didn't answer. You knew the name sounded familiar, she said slowly, saying out loud what she'd just understood. And you didn't say a word, even after I started looking into it myself, even after I got suspended, when I told you how scared I was of Trevor. I knew, he said. She stood up. I understand why you did it, she said. That doesn't make it any easier. This was never really about the concrete or the company. It's that you decided for yourself what truth to give me in pieces and what to hold back. She left without slamming the door, just closed it quietly, and that was worse than any slam would have been. Her door at home was locked, but she was sure she'd double-locked it, not single. Inside, everything was in place. Nothing moved. On the kitchen table sat one thing that shouldn't have been there. A copy of the old report on the Riverbend collapse, the same one she kept in a closed folder in her closet that she'd never shown anyone. She stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at the sheet lying dead center on the table. She called Sorensen. Somebody was in my apartment, she said. Nothing's missing. They just left my old report on the table. On my way, he said. He got there 15 minutes later, walked through the apartment, checked the windows, the door lock. No sign of forced entry. Whoever it was used a key or picked the lock, he said. Didn't force it, didn't break anything. There's a camera in my building, Cassie said.
Management put it in last year after somebody set the mailboxes on fire.
Then don't touch anything,
Sorensen said.
In the morning, we file a report and request the footage officially. Just make sure they don't overwrite it. Usually those things only hold 2 weeks or so. She sat down at the table, suddenly exhausted. I'm tired of being scared, she said. He didn't say anything, just stayed. The footage came through the property management company the next day. They watched it on Sorensen's laptop in his car parked outside her building. A man walks into the building around midnight, stops at her door, pulls out a key and opens it like he's done it before. Cassie recognized him right away. That's Pierce's assistant, she said. The one who handed us the folder. He stood at the door for a moment like he was listening, then went in, and a few minutes later came back out, empty-handed.
Didn't take anything, didn't leave anything obvious on camera, just went in and came back out. Sorensen paused the footage. He wasn't there for the folder, he said. Then what for? Looks like he wanted to know what you'd already found, Sorensen said. Cassie stared at the frozen image for a long time, the assistant's figure at her door. He wouldn't have done that on his own, she said. Somebody sent him. She knew who to ask. She went to see him the next day, no call ahead through anyone, just walked into the office and asked to be let in. He agreed right away. Trevor's in custody, she said, sitting down across from him. Pierce admitted publicly that he ignored violations at Iron Peak 5 years ago, and the night before last, somebody who works for Pierce was in my apartment. He didn't take anything. He was checking what I'd already found. And you decided that was my order? I decided he wouldn't have done it without one.
Voight sat quietly, studying her without any particular surprise. Your scheme's falling apart, she said. You know it is. Maybe, he said. Then why did you agree to see me? He was quiet for a moment. Because soon I'm going to have to answer some questions. And you wanted to talk to me first? Yes. Then talk. He looked at her directly. You want to know what would have happened if you'd shown up to that inspection on time? 6 years ago? She didn't answer. Couldn't. The concrete in that connection was already bad before you decided to move the inspection, he said. Before your decision. Rescheduling it wouldn't have changed anything. The room went quiet. Why are you telling me this? She finally asked. Because I need you to understand. I know more than you think I do, he said, including what you actually need to know and what you don't. He didn't offer a deal outright, but she heard it between the lines. Stop digging, and I'll tell you the rest on your terms. She stood up, not answering the offer he hadn't actually made. I don't need your version of the truth, she said. I'll find my own. She didn't drive home. She drove to the marker at the old Riverbend Commons site for the first time in a long while, with the folder of old material on the passenger seat. She laid out what she had on the hood of the car, a copy of the old memo, the test report, her own 6-year-old statement. She checked the dates against each other, one at a time. The concrete batch had arrived on site a few days before the collapse. The strength deviation had been logged at the time of the pour, well before she was ever supposed to come do the inspection. The anchor connection had been tied into that exact batch. She had moved the inspection back a day. That was true, and she wasn't going to keep hiding from it. But the concrete had already been bad before she ever moved anything. She'd worked that out herself. Voight had just said out loud what she was already arriving at. She stood by the marker. I should have gone a day earlier, she said out loud. That's true, but I didn't kill you, Sam. She didn't cry, just stood there a while longer, then put the papers back in the folder. At home, she laid out everything she had on the table. The correspondence, the security footage, Pierce's admission, Voight's words, which she remembered almost word for word. She called the district attorney's investigator working the case against Trevor and asked to meet the next day. That evening, a message came in, again through a Northgate representative, again carefully worded, an offer to keep her position secure, close the matter with the company for good, stop all the pressure. In exchange, she'd back off. She didn't answer it.
In the morning, she handed the investigator everything she had, walked him briefly through where each document came from, answered his questions, signed a statement. You understand this could lead straight to Voight? The investigator asked. I understand, she said. This isn't a fast process. I'm not in a hurry, she said. She left the building and called Sorensen, wanted to tell him first. I handed everything over, she said. Good, he said. You're not asking if I'm scared. I am, he said. Are you? A little. Not like before. A week later, the investigator called her himself. One of Voight's people started talking, he said. Not by choice. He's caught up in a different matter. They offered him a deal. Once he started, the others got nervous too. And Voight? Trying to make a deal, the investigator said. Sent word through his attorney, asking to have his version heard before they file charges against him as the one who ran it. Doesn't want to take the fall alone. Why now? Cassie asked. Because now he's got something to lose, the investigator said. Once one of his guys got squeezed and talked, others started talking too. He kept them quiet with fear for too long, and fear only works until the first person stops being afraid. Cassie hung up the phone. For the first time, she understood. The house of cards Voight had spent years building hadn't come down because of one decisive document. It came down because too many people he'd been holding over a barrel got tired of being scared. all around the same time. She called him 2 days later in the evening, no particular reason, just wanted to hear his voice. "Can I come by?" he asked. "Yeah." He showed up without a folder, without his phone in his hand. "Didn't bring anything?" she asked, opening the door. "No." "Not even one report?" "Not tonight," he said. They sat in the kitchen,
Talked about nothing for a while. Work, how tomorrow they'd be back to sorting through paperwork. Sorensen checked the time. Late. Yeah. He stood up, grabbed his jacket. Cassie said suddenly, "You don't have to go." He stopped. "You sure?" She nodded. "Yeah." He put the jacket back down on the chair. "Okay." Cassie smiled and took his hand. "Come on then. I'll put on coffee." "Not too strong." "Why not?" "Last time I drank your coffee, I couldn't fall asleep for 3 hours." "You'll survive." He smiled. She woke up to a sound that had never been in her apartment in the morning before. Someone in the kitchen, dishes clinking. Sorensen was trying to make coffee on the stovetop. "You know how to do that?" "Clearly not. You've got a percolator, not a coffee maker. I don't know how to use it." She tried it. "That's awful." "I tried." "Yeah, I can tell. At least I warned you I don't know what I'm doing." She laughed. Sorensen looked at her, confused. "What?" "Nothing."
"Your coffee's just terrible. At least it's honest. Is that your excuse now?" They sat down at the table, her with tea, him finishing his coffee anyway, wincing at every sip out of principle. "Regret it?" she asked. "No," he said. She smiled and drank her tea. 8 months later, Cassie was leading a new independent technical review unit within Denver Community Planning and Development. Sorensen had been reinstated by then, working alongside her now, not as an inspector on her case, just alongside her, every day. The Northgate case moved forward without her day-to-day involvement. Her office was small, on the 4th floor, looking out over construction sites across the street. At lunch, a trainee knocked on her door, holding a test report. "Ms. Moore, can you take a look at this? I think the numbers don't line up." Cassie took the sheet, checked the dates. "Looks like it," she said. "Good catch." "What if I'm wrong?" the trainee asked.
"What if it's just a typo, and I'm about to cause a panic over nothing?" "Then we check it again," Cassie said. "That's not panic, that's the job." The trainee nodded and left. Cassie pulled up the next file on her screen. Outside, the cranes were working. She looked at the first page, then at the signature at the bottom, and started reading. That's the end of this one, everyone. Cassie started this story with one strange number on a report. She ended it having learned not to look away from something that feels wrong, even when it's a whole lot easier to pretend nothing's happening. So here's a question for you. After a betrayal like that, do you think it's possible to trust someone again? Or are some things broken for good once they're broken?
Let me know what you think in the comments. I really do read them. If you liked this one, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. And if you want more, check out the other stories on the channel. There might be another one in there that hits just as hard. Narrated by Vitaly. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. See you in the next one.